Hi. So I want to make a correction on a recent video that I posted. Um, and the topic was evolution. And so in that video, I demonstrated a hand gesture that helps evolve the form. And I want to explain a little bit as to why that is, right? But also give a disclaimer about the discretion, the discernment, and organ infection. It fits the video topic. And so basically it's this, and some people have certain ideas about what this means, right? And so it's very close in signature to what I call the sign of the Dalai Lama, right? It looks like a little llama, right? Some of us did this in grade school as a little hand puppet gesture. Much about the correspondences and mudras. Esoterically, there is actual meaning behind this, right? And so it's not necessarily that this is evil, right? And so let me get into the explanation, right? So in numerology, 5 is the number of freedom. It's also the number of discernment. It means for me to be free, I need to use my discernment, right? In terms of how to be sovereign. The reason that I suggested this, and I will say, and do believe it works, right? Is because the basis of it is a why, right? And we hear in pop culture, about mutation and the X chromosome, and the Y chromosome is very important as well, right? And to play on words here, it's like we ask the question why, and the discernment comes, right? And so this is almost like a gateway and a pathway. But here's the thing, because we have five here, right? We have 4 here when these 2 are conjoined. Okay, so that's 3 here, 2 here. Okay, and so what that says is that as we evolve, right, evolution, this evolution of 4 is actually supposed to come after the discernment of 5. And so in terms of our trajectory as a species, what is it that we are actually supposed to focus on evolving? Is it really ourselves? I argue not really. That is meant for our enjoyment, right? And so this gesture can almost be seen as like a war gesture, right? If you do believe in multidimensionality, right? And if you believe in what I reference as Aquarian pop culture, right, which is mutation. We don't want to fight each other. Diplomacy really is a better route. And so what do we evolve? And then again, I'm going to leave the sound of the construction in here. Even though it's annoying, because that's the answer. In Feng Shui, one of the principles is that energy gets trapped in the crevices of walls. And then when something disturbs it, it reverberates and it creates that annoyance, right? And so it's gonna be a long video. Okay, so and so one of the fundamental foundational things that my consciousness actually speaks about when I do work out in the world is that we need to round the edges of the walls. Okay, we think a little bit about, beautiful architecture, right? Square buildings are very they can be very misleading, right? They can be very misleading. It's not about whether we like them or not. It's about whether they work right or not. And they really don't. And so when we round the edges of those corners, right, we get a more beautiful architecture, and we get one where energy flows easier. It helps the consciousness not feel so confined. Nobody likes to be in boxes. And so, one, that's a part of the environment, and then to further that, right? How do we support that? And that's through the recyclical process, right, of materials. And so it's it's those two things combined, right? And it's almost like this, right? It's the two here and the two here, right? That creates the foundation, and these two, they're really almost kind of the same. When I say it's in my last video, it's 11:11, a call to find another. Really, what that is you are always inside with your other, but here in the physical world, you are separate. Okay. And so in order to come together, right? And there's another hand gesture here too, which is almost the inverse. It's a little bit hard to do, right? Because we haven't gotten there yet. We do the work as a whole, as humanity, right? And that means using your resources, using your diplomacy, because the goal here is, if we are to mutate to psychic consciousness and further that progression, which a lot of us have been on the brink of, and the conversation was, why do we not use the psychic ability to change the environment? Well, it's incompatible. You're messing with the time-space dimension that way. You have to use tools to be able to do this, right? That's the way that you honor the physical. And so it's very important. And so if we are, ever to mutate to, say, I want to have wings, right? I want to be able to fly. We build arenas and we have psychic sports, right? Psychic gatherings, okay? Not for war, and they're for us, you know. We've reached a point where the human form ought not to be bypassed. It needs to work in tandem with what the environment is now for us to progress our to progress all as a whole, right? And then when we do that, we get the reward. And so I hope that clarifies things a little bit. I'm gonna, you know, sign this off basically as my my lunation video for the upcoming. You guys use the terms full moon and new moon. I use the terms light moon and dark moon, and so. But the upcoming lunation is, according to the charts that we've been given, is Aries, right? And Aries is about action, you know, and so it can also be about war. And so, you know, I think also it can be environmental, because where else does an Aries fit in better than a sports arena? I don't know if a lot of astrologers would argue that, right? It seems like one of those like done to deaths, right? But there's reason for it there too, and so I do hope you all take this into consideration. I am going to ask the higher realms to broadcast my speech here. And stream it through consciousness. Without I don't want the distraction of the construction, but I want it to be known that there's a point there with it. And I might redo this video in quieter terms. And I might also do a demonstration. I might do a video clip of a corner, and show you guys how energy can get trapped there, and really the effect, maybe even putting your hand over it and rounding it, right, can have. We've been talking about infrastructure and you know, how you know, society, right? And so it has to. It's so pivotal that we incorporate this aspect into that progression, and into that trajectory. And so I thank you all for listening with hope, love, and faith. Blessings, blessings.